Hi, I'm Richard Steller.
Hi, I'm Anne Marie Johnson.
Thanks for joining us for our Mankind Project podcast.
Our very first.
You can reach us at themankindproject.org, and we thank you for watching.
Thank you. Well, welcome, Anne. Welcome to the Mankind Project podcast in honor of Black History Month. And Richard and I are honored to have you here. I know you personally, but I also know you professionally. So why don't you tell us a little about Anne Young, retired LAPD, first African-American female captain of the LAPD, but you had humble beginnings in New York. So why don't you tell us a little bit about growing up in New York?
It was exciting. I wish we had stayed in New York, actually. But I didn't have a choice. My parents decided that they wanted to move to California after one of my aunts moved from Wisconsin to California.
Wow, there are black people in Wisconsin? Well,
There were
since
a
she
few.
moved, I guess there are no more.
There were a few, being that they are from the West Indies.
Yeah.
The weather in New York was just extremely cold, and my parents we wanted to go to a warmer climate. So since my aunt moved, we followed.
Where in LA, or did you go directly from New York to Los Angeles?
No, actually, we moved to Compton, California. And that was actually almost a culture shock, because back then Compton was all white.
All white, yeah.
We were the first black family to move on the block. I was bused to the local high school because they were trying to integrate Dominguez High School in Compton. So it wasn't just happening in the South as far as integration and trying to get people on board with the sign of the times. It was happening right there in Compton.
What was it like being the first black family in that neighborhood?
Well, I have to say thank God for my dad, because my dad was a talker. He talked to everybody. My mom was shyer, so she wasn't really outgoing. And for me, it was a little bit of a struggle, because coming from New York, where New York was more of a melting pot truly, we're moving into Compton where it was all white and only black family. Initially, people weren't that friendly. But then all of a sudden, I don't know what happened, because I was a child, things changed. And the neighbors were coming over, my mom was going over there. I think it was because my dad liked to talk, and that helped out a lot.
Actually, there's going to be a new limited series on the Apple Network. It's going to be a horror project, but they're concentrating on the migration of African Americans from the South and back east to Compton.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I didn't know Compton was a white
Oh,
area.
yes.
Yeah.
Wow. I
Very
remember
white.
my father used to sell aluminum siding or something, and I would go with him, and
Yes.
he would have a lot of customers in Compton.
Yes,
Because it was Compton was a working middle class community because of all the materials needed for the war. It was a community
It's true.
that was created to house many of the workers.
So it was difficult for you to be the first
For
black
me
family.
as
for
a
you.
child, but I think my parents were fine.
And you mentioned your dad. How did your dad help you through it?
Because he said, you got to get out there and talk to people. They don't know you. You have to get out and talk. I was quiet. And leaving New York and going to Compton.
Yeah.
New York had tall buildings. Compton was flat. I didn't even like the way it looked. I was used to
Must have
Brooklyn,
looked
New
like the
York.
prairie.
Yeah, it was just very dry. And I left all my friends in Brooklyn and the life that I wanted to have back east. Because growing up in Brooklyn is when I first wanted to be a police officer, actually. The officers were very friendly, outgoing.
Were they of color?
Not many.
Interesting.
But what I enjoyed about growing up in Brooklyn and getting to know the police officers there, they would even know your name. They had a foot beat, so they would know all about you. They'd show up every Sunday to our house for dinner. Basically, the whole watch would
Really?
show up.
Wow.
And my mom would just roll out a big spread. They'd come in and sit down and talk to my dad.
That was community policing before we even knew what community policing
Absolutely.
was. Yeah.
Does that happen now?
I think we would like to have our officers do something like that. I think in a lot of communities, officers are welcomed in to the home. I found that as a LAPD cop, families would welcome me in and sit down and talk. So
What's different with Los Angeles when my father was a police officer years before Ann was, but what was different back then, police officers couldn't work in the precinct or in the department where they lived. So my father worked in every other station but the Rampart, which is the area we lived. Is that different now?
we don't mandate it, but we do advise don't work where you eat for
Right.
safety reasons.
Yeah.
A lot of officers do tend to work in the areas where they, live, but safety, we advise not to do that.
So what? So in this neighborhood that you're growing up in, you probably saw the neighborhood change. The policemen were approachable. They became part of your socialization. It sounds like. When did you discover that this is the life that you wanted? That you wanted to become a police officer?
Well, actually, I didn't get in a lot of trouble, but there was an officer.
I knew there was something different about you.
It wasn't trouble, but an officer came over for Sunday dinner, and he looked very troubled. And my dad told me to excuse myself and leave the room. So I ran up the stairs, and I'm hiding out at the top of the stairs listening because I wanted to know what was going on. He was actually speaking to my father about possibly getting a divorce from his wife. And my dad talked to him for hours.
What did your dad do?
Well, before they moved to Brooklyn, my dad was a teacher in Jamaica. But then when he moved to Brooklyn, New York, he couldn't get a job. So he became a custodian.
Oh.
But people looked up to
They
him.
did because
And
he was
considered him
educated.
wise and educated.
Yeah.
Now, the officer who was seeking
Guidance.
was he black or white?
He was white.
Fascinating.
Fitzpatrick was his name.
Wow.
Yeah, I still remember his name.
Nice Italian name.
Yeah. So they heard me at the top of the stairs, and I was quickly
You
told
busted.
to, go to bed. So, but I thought, wow, it's pretty neat that you have that type of relationship with a family that you don't even really know. You've come into our house and you've eaten many Sunday dinners. And to be able to sit down with someone and seek that type of guidance and, different race,
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I thought, wow, this is something I want to do. Because I thought that impressed me even all these years.
When you finally came to that decision, okay, I'm going to try out for one of the most prestigious police departments in the world, LAPD, did your parents support you 100%, or was there, we're not in New York any longer, and the LAPD has a different reputation with regard to people of color?
They supported me 100%,
Wow.
especially my dad.
That's great. Are they still around, your parents?
No, they both have passed away.
What was the biggest challenge in becoming a policeman? Is it because you were black or because you were a woman?
They interchange. I mean,
Flip a coin.
it's hard to say because I've seen many black women who are taller than I am not have any problems. So was it because they were the
interesting.
height?
I never
Was it
thought
because
of
they
that.
were black or because they were women?
Because there is no when my father was a police officer, there was a height requirement. Then a lawsuit changed that.
Yes, and it's gone back and forth. When I initially looked into becoming a police officer, the height requirement was 5'8", and I'm nowhere near 5'8". So, but through the years, it's changed to where there was now that I think, and I'm not quite sure, there's no requirement as far as height. You can be 4'8", 4'11", whatever.
Did you ever feel that because you didn't meet that height requirement, whatever that was, did you feel that it challenged you physically when you were on the job?
Well, we met the height requirement because at one point they lowered it to 5 feet. So I did meet that requirement for the
You
record.
just squeezed in.
But, of course, you wish, or I did wish that I could be taller, but you develop other skills. And through your training, we were well-trained police officers to be able to handle situations, and I think know what your limitations are, and how you can handle a situation if the guy is 6'5" or the lady's 6'5".
Right.
You go back to your training, and we're very well-trained.
Was there a color line in the LAPD that you had to deal with?
Depends on what you mean.
I mean that were you were Latino and African American officers as engaged in relations with white officers as much as they were in relationships amongst themselves?
Hard to say. I think as people, we kind of gravitate towards our own, and we wait for that permission to be invited to cross that line, if that makes sense.
It does, but I'm kind of like thinking about your father and
Because he
how
was a
hands.
talker.
Yeah, but I'm also that he was so welcoming and engaging with. It didn't matter. I don't think it mattered what color they were. How did your father look on your career?
Well, of course, he was very proud of what I decided to do because it wasn't my first career. I went into teaching initially, and then I went into law enforcement. So he was very proud of it.
I think it's fascinating that both careers, teaching and law enforcement, you were living outside of yourself. You were giving, you were providing, you were trying to help others. That obviously it was in your DNA from your folks.
From my folks, yeah.
That's fascinating.
But you moved up the ranks and you became captain.
Yes.
Yeah, how did that happen?
Through a lot of hard work. Hard work, determination. I think for me, having the support of a few mentors on the department that weren't women. Because at that time, there weren't a lot of women above me. Very few. Chief Bernard Parks actually was the chief that made me captain.
Wow.
And it took a lot of doing, I would imagine, to be the first of anything.
Because your
It's
role
difficult.
models weren't women.
No.
Your role models were men.
Were men
captain,
or very few white women.
Right.
I did work for the first African American female lieutenant. So.
And you outranked her. At some
Well,
point.
she retired before I made captain.
That's
But
good.
and she has since passed away, but I still call her Lieutenant Helen Camp.
Yeah, oh, sure. Yeah.
Because out of the respect, and I can only imagine what she had to endure being the
Sure.
first female lieutenant, black lieutenant on the department.
Did you feel any racial heat when, like during the Rodney King thing, or if there was, it looks like I tripped a nerve. Tell me about what that experience was like.
That was a very interesting time to be African American, be a police officer in Los Angeles. And I'll tell you what happened. That night of the riots, I was a sergeant working downtown Central. And our job that night was to protect Parker Center, which is headquarters. You talk about how difficult it was, being thrown rocks and bottles and eggs and who knows what they were throwing at us. But to look out into the crowd and see my sister.
Your biological sister.
My biological sister.
As a protester?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Whoa.
And I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Did you know she was going to be out there, or did it just...
No, I didn't.
Oh.
That's
And
like
I
the
didn't even
story
tell
of a doctor
anybody.
responding to an accident and,
And
then
it's
noticing
it's
it's
a family
it's
member.
a family
That
member.
must have been crushing.
I couldn't imagine what I was seeing. So I kindly excused myself because I had a line of officers. I was a sergeant. So I excused myself, went around and tapped her on the shoulder and said, I need to talk to you over here.
Was there any question about where your allegiances were?
From her?
Well, when
from the
you,
group.
I'm just thinking, you
Overall.
see a family member breaking the law, or in a situation where laws are being broken, and does your concern for a family member go ahead of your professionalism, or how did you approach it?
Well, what I told her was that this is very serious out here. I don't know why you're here. I didn't know you were coming, but we kind of mean business out here tonight.
Yeah.
It's almost as if you were concerned for her physical safety.
Yes,
I
because
remember it was very violent.
It was very violent. I said, I think you probably need to leave and express your opinion in a different way.
And what was her response?
Of course, she was angry,
Yeah.
very upset. I said, I don't know what to tell you. We're in the middle of a situation right now.
Did she question your allegiance?
No, because she knew where I was coming from. It was very difficult because the black officers that I had working with me that night, not only were we attacked physically, verbally, they weren't calling us Sergeant Young or
No.
Officer
Right.
so-and-so. They were calling us very, very nasty names, actually. But we had a job to do. And one thing with law enforcement, no matter if you agree with what's happening or not, you are in the middle. You're to protect both sides.
Right.
You're in the middle. Your personal opinions can't really play into this at all.
The same thing happened, a different dynamic with my father during the Watts riots. So for his particular station, police department, he was not allowed to patrol during the Watts riots because, now remember, this is 1965. The powers that be were concerned that the black officers would side with the aggrieved residents of Watts and assist in the riots as opposed to
Protecting
honoring
us.
the shield. And which was an affront to all the African American officers
Yeah.
because their first priority was the safety of the community. As a police officer. So I remember as a child, my father wasn't patrolling. He was, I was 5,
Probably
and I
inside.
really remember him being home while we were watching.
The city
fires.
on fire.
And here we go. Less than 2 decades later, we have Los Angeles on fire.
It was on fire.
But we have the African American officers there protecting the residents.
It's a very,
It's very, very odd.
yeah, it's a,
And thanks so much for sitting down with us. As you know, this is our first podcast, and we're so lucky to have someone who has reached such a high level within the LAPD. What I want to ask you, our final question is, did you leave the LAPD like you found it?
well, I certainly hope not. I hope it's in a much better place. Kind of hard to answer that question. I know now there are more women on the Los Angeles Police Department who are very skilled, dedicated, lovely women that just want to do their job without any intimidation, harassment. They just want a clean environment in order to work. We have a female black deputy chief. We have a female black commander, a few black captains. I'd like to say that, of course, it's in a much better place, but there's still more work to be done. I think with women, black women on the LAPD, we need to still come into our own, if that makes sense, to where we are, we're at the table, but I just hope that the voices are being heard at the table. When I came on, no one was at the table. No one could even see the table. But now I'm hoping that the women that are very smart, intelligent, thoughtful, love the job, love the community, are doing great things because it's inside. You can't create a police officer like a puzzle. I truly believe that it is a calling, and those that are successful It comes from their heart. And the women and men that are successful truly love the job. It's not easy. Every day is not a cakewalk, as we say. It's very difficult. The sacrifices that people have to make in order to be a police officer, I don't think that people truly understand. Not only the physical sacrifices, the personal sacrifices, people don't really understand what officers go through every day, just to every day put on that uniform and go out and work in the community, and sometimes work a community where they don't even want you there. But you have to do your job and then go home and be a normal person. It's very difficult. And even now, more so than probably when I came on. The attacks on law enforcement daily. There's so many officers that are losing their life in this profession. But yet, people are still answering that call. People are still signing up. So I hope I left it in a better place than when I came on.
I think you have.
Definitely have. And I want to recommend our viewers to check out The Thin Blue Line, the February edition in honor of Black History Month. Captain Ann Young, along with her peers and predecessors, this edition honors the firsts of those who served LAPD who happen to be African American, and you're part of a very impressive list of firsts. So congratulations to
Thank
that
you.
too.
And thanks for joining us.
Thank you.